Despite outscoring opponents by an average of almost 13 points a game so far this season, the Utah Jazz still haven't gained much respect from NBA fans. They're currently sitting at the number 1 seed for the second year in a row, yet still aren't widely recognized as legitimate threats to win the Western Conference. But why could this be? Is it their tendency to live and die by the three-point shot? Do they simply lack the superstar talent to push them over these other high-level teams? Is it their weak point of attack defense, an over-reliance on Rudy Gobert on that end? Is it Gobert's inability to punish small lineups that limits his defensive impact? All of these concerns, among many more, lead to the ultimate question: are the Utah Jazz a regular season team? Utah has ran a very similar scheme over the past few seasons behind Quinn Snyder. Their offense is built around the high pick and roll, and the wide variety of capable initiators on the roster makes this very effective. Of course, there's the starting point guard Mike Conley, whose main objective is to keep the point of attack defender behind him as he gets in between to set up his floater. This is lethal because of just how good of a decision maker he is, forcing the big man to either commit to his floater or masking that shot into a lob to the roll man. To avoid getting stuck behind him, you'll often see his defenders go under the screen, which allows him to pull back into his proficient three-point shot. Conley is definitely the best pick-and-roll passer on the roster, but as for their best pick-and-roll scorer, that's none other than the two-time All-Star Donovan Mitchell. His approach is a bit different. He's looking to get to his pull-up jumper off the screen, and the lethal rate at which he converts on those shots pulls bigs to the three-point line and creates 4-on-3 advantages in the short roll. Now this is where the first real flaw in their offensive game comes to light. Although Gobert is generally good about catching the quick passes and finding a shooter, when the rotation comes early, he's prone to some bad decisions, not really knowing what to do with the ball going downhill. This makes Mitchell hesitant to capitalize on the advantages he creates at times and can lead to him over-dribbling into a tougher shot. Sticking with the theme of over-dribbling into a tougher shot, none other than Jordan Clarkson fits that description to a T. He's a very skilled and crafty scorer who gets to his spots well off the screen, but when the defense commits to him, the play is good as done, as his tunnel vision prevents him from ever really making the right read. He'll have those moments where he catches fire and seemingly nobody on the planet can stop him from scoring, but him not being able to leverage his gravity into opportunities for teammates makes him very schemable. The final primary pick-and-roll ball handler for Utah is Joe Ingles, and his approach slightly differs from tradition. While the first three I've mentioned all usually start these plays with the ball in their hands, Ingles almost always gets pulled into it off the ball. This is because he's really only effective attacking to his left, and to avoid predictability, they'll just have him curl straight into the action in an attempt to catch his man off guard. He normally stays level and parallel to the roll man, and that's because he excels at quick shovel passes while going downhill, but he's just as dangerous pulling back into an outside shot. This collection of pick-and-roll ball handlers who all have slight differences in their approach add a level of offensive versatility that becomes very hard to stop with just two defenders. Because of this, opposing defenses often rely on their corner or wing defenders to rotate and cover the big, or in simpler terms, roll gravity opens up shooters. 3 of those 4 guys are more than capable of making cross-court passes, and Utah filling their roster with near 40% three-point shooters makes these opportunities automatic offense. This is where people say Utah lives by the 3 and dies by the 3, and if we look at their outside shooting over the past 3 seasons, in both the regular season and in the playoffs, this just doesn't seem to be the problem at all. Let's take it a step further and look at just how good their overall offense was during these years, and with back-to-back seasons finishing with a top 2 playoff offense, it's pretty clear that this isn't the main problem. Sure, they can be a bit over-dependent on Mitchell doing ridiculous things at times, and there's still a few questions on just how real his playoff jump is, but even with the consistent injuries and guys being moved in and out of the lineup, they've produced at the highest level on that end of the floor. On the defensive end, the Jazz have consistently been in the mix for that number 1 spot. Rightfully so, Rudy Gobert has earned 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in just 4 seasons, and because of just how elite his rim protection is, Utah can build their entire scheme around it. Perimeter defenders are able to fully commit to every shot at the three-point line without having to worry about recovering, because the best backline defender in basketball is watching every move. This forces opponents to live in the mid-range, which we all know is the least efficient shot in basketball. The thing is, although most of these perimeter defenders aren't very good, because they can get blown by without much negative return, they aren't actually a detriment to the team as long as they're running shooters off the line, and as a result, Gobert is able to floor raise them to a top defense in the regular season. Come postseason time, it's an entirely different game, and no, it's not because Rudy Gobert can't guard the perimeter or that he's turning into a liability, but more so opponents recognize that Utah's entire defensive prowess is reliant on one guy, so they do everything in their power to take that dominance away. All of a sudden, pulling that rim protection away from the basket allows these blow-bys to take place and turn into layup lines. This was most noticeable against the Clippers in the 2021 playoffs, where they ran a 5-out scheme and attacked the rim every single possession down the court. The Jazz responded by planting Gobert in the paint and forcing LA to beat them at the 3-point line. Long story short, this didn't work. It just isn't a sustainable model to have your defense so reliant on one guy if you have championship aspirations, and their consistent defensive shortcomings in the playoffs further reinforce this. A point that many raise as a possible solution to the problem is Rudy taking advantage of the smaller, spaced out lineups on the other end with dominant inside play. Remember earlier I mentioned that Conley is the best pick and roll passer on the roster, plain and simple, but he's also the only one who consistently finds Gobert in these spots to control the paint offensively. He was injured in both of his first 2 playoff runs with Utah, which I would say has prevented them from making any serious noise. Although their offense has been very good in the playoffs, it does concern me a bit that Mitchell seems to be the only self-creating scorer they can heavily rely on, and if he goes cold at any moment, it can get rough for this team. Whereas almost every other contender has a second guy to fall back on when the primary weapon struggles, this just doesn't apply to the Jazz, potentially lacking the necessary offensive talent. Teams stretching the floor on the other end is still a major concern, as they haven't really done much to improve their point of attack defense from last season, and if a team catches fire from deep again, it'll feel like deja vu. We can look at how they perform overall come playoff time, going back 5 seasons now, and they do see a pretty consistent drop off. It's worth noting that they were the underdog in every single series before 2021, but I think when people saw that historic regular season play, and then the loss to the Clippers without their best player, they quickly became the poster child for regular season teams. Every single championship in NBA history has come with some form of luck, and it feels like the Utah Jazz have regularly been on the worst side of that. Here they stand again, with the best record in the NBA, and yet another historic point differential. And barring injury, I have no reason to believe this team isn't a real contender. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website, podcast, and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments where you think the Jazz stack up with the rest of the Western Conference and what you think their ceiling as a team is. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.